What's up YouTube? Off here today with my first build of the 092 patch. Got a couple more coming soon, so if you like what you see today, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Let's get into this build. Features the new item, the Mad Alchemist Ladle, and the fragment of the Enigma. By stacking intelligence, cast speed, and the number of ailments we apply, we boost the damage of our spark charges, Frostclaw, elemental nova procs, and our plasma orb significantly. We use the foot of the mountain to reduce the cost of Frostclaw down to 0, so we can spam it to our heart's content and still maintain and gain mana. Mainly, this is required only against bosses. In Monolith clearing, we switch to another pair of boots, which can increase our movement speed significantly. In this build, Int scales cast speed, flat damage for spark charges, critical strike chance, cooldown reduction, percent damage, and ward retention. Intelligence really is the master stat. And this simplifies gearing down to just stacking int and increased crit. Defenses are covered by Runemaster passives, ward generation, and increasing our cast speed. We get ward on crit, which we're hitting almost 50 times per second at about 180 to 190 cast speed. We also get ward on hit against bosses due to Brand of Deception, and we also generate ward on every cast due to the bonuses in the Frostclaw tree and the Runemaster passive. So our offense and defense scales from cast speed. We have on-demand lightning aegis due to having static orb on our bar, which allows us to frequently have lightning aegis up for both damage reduction and cast speed, a very large cast speed bonus because we are running 3 idols at least, which increase our cast speed while we have it. Static orb is also spec'd to charge ground to give us additional dot damage since we are stacking crit multiplier as well. Since we are proccing elemental nova, we have flame ward on our bar since we have an open slot. And if we want to take even more defense, we can substitute out our prismatic gaze for the new helm Crest of Unity, which will further give us a less damage multiplier. Additionally, since we are using Foot of the Mountain and stacking intelligence, if you have one, a red ring is definitely possible to use. Overall, I really like this build. And I had to settle on Plasma Orb over Ball Lightning due to a bug. But ultimately, I really do enjoy using Plasma Orb for my invoke. So let's go ahead and get into our skills, how they interact in our build, our passives, and exactly what type of gearing we want to use, and some of the options we have for fighting bosses and just general monolith clearing. A little bit of gameplay here. So mainly, the build consists of casting Teleport on cooldown to proc our elemental novas, spamming Frostclaw, keeping up lightning aegis by casting static orb, and then we auto-cast our plasma orbs from immutable order. Alright, so going over our skills, we'll start with teleport here. First we spec for reduced cooldown. We take additional flat armor and cold resist. Take points here for fire and lightning resist as needed due to your gear. We spec over here to get our 3 casts of Elemental Nova to apply 3 spark charges whenever we teleport. We are doing this frequently during boss fights to maintain our buffs and to apply additional spark charges. For our static orb, we are specking charge ground and increasing our crit multiplier and applying lightning aegis. This is the primary use of this. The charge ground is useful just because it does apply some additional damage over time effects. Our Frostclaw is what really makes the build here. We are speccing it for fire. We'll cover that again once we get into runic, but it's mainly for our immutable order or invoking our plasma orb. But we take the multiple hit projectiles down here. We take as much ward on cast as possible, and we take 3 points in Celestial Confluence to get the highest chance to proc our elemental novas on cast. Interesting point is if you were to avoid going these nodes down here, you could actually go 1 point over here and get 2 chances per cast to cast Elemental Nova while still maintaining a 0 mana cost. But I prefer the multi-hit because this allows us a lot higher ward generation and from our ward on crit and our hit on ward on hit against bosses, as well as allowing for faster stacking of armor shred and maintaining all of our ailments, even though we have a lower % chance to apply some of them. We obviously also have to take the mana cost as low as possible. It isn't enough, even with our wand, to make it free, so we do have to rely on the Foot of the Mountain boots, but we'll cover that more when we get to the gearing section. Elemental Nova, we go over here to get the 3 separate more multipliers here. Each of those are all a 30% more multiplier against Chilled, Shocked, and Ignited. We take 5 points for Spark Charges on hit, so every time we proc a Nova, we get a Spark Charge. And we're taking increased crit multi as we are attempting to get as high crit chance as possible. When we get over to Runic Invocation, we are using Immutable Order, which means it follows the elements of our skills on our bar. And then we are using Runic Energy to repeat. And basically we are numlocking our Runic Invocation. So we get to cast our Runic Invocation roughly every 6 seconds. But we always have 6 Runic Energy, so we have a 60% chance to double cast our Plasma Orbs. And since we're proccing Elemental Nova, as I mentioned earlier, we have Flame Ward on our bar for some on-demand damage reduction. Going over our gear, starting with the Mad Alchemist Ladle. Ideally, you want to find one of these with 2 or 3 LPs, since it's entirely possible to do so. But you want to get Critical Strike Multiplier and cast speed on them, ideally. A good suffix you can actually land on one is Chance to Blind, because it's not really available on Runemaster. And if you are not using Prismatic Gaze, you're opting for the Crest of Unity, increased chance to critical strike with spells would also be a good option. Moving on to the Prismatic Gaze, you obviously don't want one that looks like mine, because mine's terrible. I hit the only non-good stat that I didn't want on my Prismatic Gaze. I missed my T7 int roll, and my base crit roll is also bad on it, but unfortunately it's the best one I got, so I'm using this. You can also opt for the Crest of Unity to have further damage reduction and to scale the damage of your Elemental Nova procs higher. For your amulet, obviously you don't want this base, but it's the best one I had that fit the stats I need, having the maximum amount of increased crit I can get, % armor shred, and covering one of my resists that I need. Obviously we're going to be trying to use Fragment of the Enigma, as mentioned earlier. We want to get as much area increase as possible for general mono clearing. And ideally you want one with LP. I've done like 10 or 15 of them now with no LP. So woe is me, but ideally again, critical strike multiplier, increase % cast speed, or % increase spell crit, again if you're using the other helm. For your chest, you are going to want a celestial raiment for the critical strike multiplier. You're going to want flat int, increased spell crit, and health rolls here. For your belt, cooldown reduction speed and increased health. You could get some cool experimental affixes on here for prefixes if you manage to land them. There's some that could be useful for the build. On your rings, you're going to want, again, intelligence and increased critical strike chance. I am using a red ring in my build, so on my Foot of the Mountains, I am going to want as high all attributes as possible because I am shooting for at least 180. A note about the Foot of the Mountain, this is how we maintain our mana against bosses, but when you're clearing monoliths, the plasma orbs and a couple casts of your Frostclaw are enough to kill pretty much everything. So you really don't have to worry about mana too much in monoliths, so I choose to use the new experimental affix, further cooldown reduction and move speed for my boots when I'm running monoliths. Really makes things nice and smooth and speedy. For our relic, we're using Twisted Heart because obviously we need even more ward. This gives us plus elemental spells, some more armor, and our all-important cast speed. I'm using Swaddling of the Erased. My roll is pretty terrible, and I didn't hit int or cast speed, so I have room to improve here. I just don't have one yet. I did get T7 armor shred, so that is pretty nice. So ideally on these you want to get int and armor shred. Those are the two things you want. Int to cast speed, great, but then you're going to want to get a T6 or T7 armor shred on your amulet. For our relics, we're obviously using increased cast speed with lightning aegis. Another thing to note, you want to make sure you have one of these 2 slotters with a percent chance to bleed, so we have bleed to count on our ailment list. This help does proc when we cast our invocation, even though it is fully refunded, so we do get our elemental penetrations from this node. But on our blessings, I do still choose to get cold and lightning shred to maintain 10 stacks. Although I do plan on refarming this one to swap it out for probably additional armor to get a little more tankiness. I'm not totally set on that yet, but getting these 2 is a good additional source of ailments uptime. We're taking Spell Leech to pair with our Twisted Heart, all resistances, because in our passives we are taking reduced damage from crits as opposed to doing crit avoidance. And then we're taking flat armor here. Moving on to our passives, we are maxing out our critical strike multiplier and crit chance and knowledge of destruction. We're taking 5 points here to scale crit off our int, 5 points here for the 25% cast speed. This is one of the ways we maintain our mana from this burst, getting our Frostclaw down to 0. We get our damage reduction from this node. We take the thresh points for Rumor Cataclysm, Burning Wind, Brain of Deception, Ancient Inscriptions, Jagged Veil, and Celestial Doom. Obviously you want to max this one because we don't have a lot of spell damage. One of the reasons why I opted for Plasma Orb as opposed to Ball Lightning is to have better uptime on Brain of Deception. It follows me around, makes things fun for clearing, make sure we have constant application so we can generate ward against those bosses and rares as soon as they pop up. I mentioned this earlier with the blessings, but we are trying to reduce bonus damage from crits as opposed to avoiding them. Ideally, you'd like to have one of the new suffixes on one of your armor slots where it's available. We're taking this node because this gives us a ton of ward generation with Frostclaw. I imagine at some point this may get nerfed, but we'll use it while it's here. And obviously we're getting the crit strike multi from using a wand. One thing to note on our passives, this is the boss kill setup. I will have both of these linked in the description below the video. But one setup will be more focused on boss killing in dungeons, while the other will be for speedy monolith clearing. Speedy monolith clearing, we're going to take points in this to get the 10% move speed here, and we're going to take 6 points here to get the additional 10% move speed there.